Biz Buzz on Mallow FM 97.5.
This is Dermot Fitzpatrick and welcome to the Biz Buzz programme. We're with you for the next 90 minutes with conversation around the business world. Delighted to have in the studio with me this afternoon my co-presenter, Wisdom de Costa. Good afternoon, Wisdom.
Good afternoon, Dermot. Good afternoon, listeners.
And also joining us in the studio is Malcolm Parr. Malcolm came to our Marlow FM volunteers meeting at the Assembly Room in last week, and he's just come in to join us as a guest and see how the studio works. You're welcome too, Malcolm.
Thank you, Dermot. Looking forward to it.
So on the programme this afternoon, we've got some interesting conversations to cover. First of all, the continuing fallout over the HSBC tax avoidance scandal. And we're particularly interested in this approach by Greg Wise. He went on the Good Morning programme, TV programme, and he's been talking about how he's preparing not to pay any tax until some more people are held responsible for this.
I think he actually said he's going to consult with his accountants.
Is that what he did?
He's going to have to work out paradigm before he dares say anything about not paying tax. But certainly he thinks we perhaps should be thinking about not paying tax.
I think you could probably say you're not going to pay tax until the time comes for you to actually pay it, because you could say what you like, couldn't you? And then just when they send you the tax return, you just you can complete it then.
I'm sure you're right on that one. Yes.
Is it legal?
Any volunteers out there who'd like to try that one out for us?
I imagine by that. Well, we're going to talk about that later, but I imagine that he's going to get a really good support and a legal support in what he's planning to do.
It does sound like a number of lawyers and other people have contacted him already. Yes.
Speaking about accountants, we have a question: is can accountants save the world? And as it so happens, we are fortunate enough to have an accountant here with us in the studio this afternoon, so I'm sure we're going to get a very, very concise answer for that. There's also a question about supermarkets. If supermarkets have been, what's this word that we're looking to, doing something...
Squeezing.
Squeezing was the word you said. There's another S, but we'll use the word squeezing this afternoon because it's before the watershed hour. They're squeezing their suppliers and perhaps other people, as Malcolm was saying earlier, down the line, squeezing other people down the pecking order. Yeah, who would be the top employers for 2015, and what would it take to be a top employer in the Thames Valley area? And we've got a couple of other stories about the Treasury making £750 million out of the sale of Eurostar. And is there a boom in construction, and does it signal the end of the recession? But to start us off with, we're going to talk about this continuing saga, the scandal with the tax avoidance. Being an expert in tax wisdom, I'm going to pass this one neatly over to you.
Right, I'm trembling already. I actually bank with HSBC, so please shut your ears, guys. Yeah, the interesting thing was that Douglas Flint and Gulliver, the chairman of HSBC, were called back to the Treasury Committee on the 25th of February and given another grilling by Margaret Hodge. And they took the opportunity to blame local managers of the Swiss private bank for failures in control. So it wasn't their fault, it was someone else's fault.
So the employees weren't following, somebody wasn't following instructions, or somebody went to Maverick.
A whole company, by the sound of it.
Do I hear hands being washed in large basins or something?
It sounds a bit pilot-like, yes. Pilate.
A bit of a Pontius Pilate going on there.
Right. Yeah, so that was very, very surprising. That although they took the opportunity to say that it's the reputational damage was horrible, and that breaking tax laws is, of course, abhorrent and completely unacceptable. Nevertheless, under their watch, part of their group actually is indulged in some of the most abhorrent tax avoidance.
And bringing in that story about Greg Wise, he's suggesting, I listened to the program, and he's suggesting there's like one account. There's a particular account into which lots and lots of people have put money. There's billions of pounds. He said there's enough to wipe out the debt of in Great Britain.
Greg's made some fantastic points there. I mean, he's clearly an angry person. He's joined Russell Brand and a number of other notable celebrities who, although they're wealthy, they want tax justice. Perhaps there are one or two other celebrities out there who are not interested in tax justice, but that's another story. But let me read what he said. So he said that there are hundreds of Brits who have squirreled away billions of pounds, and HMRC know who they are, but it's only resulted, as you say, in one prosecution. So he complained that instead of HMRC focusing on these wealthy millionaires and billionaires who are deliberately avoiding their tax obligations, instead they're doing dawn raids on plumbers, imprisoning mothers for claiming too much tax credit. he goes on actually to say that HMRC is morally bankrupt. Now, I'm not sure I entirely agree with that, because I think the buck doesn't stop at HMRC, but it goes a little higher to perhaps some of the ministers who actually are required to control and mandate HMRC to do their job. So he says HMRC is morally bankrupt. And you're right. He says that he's pretty sure that HMRC knows who owes them money, and there is enough, perhaps, money squirreled away to stop the swinging cuts, as he calls. I don't think he realistically meant, we could get out. There's £1 trillion worth of unpaid tax, which would wipe out the government's debt. But, so he goes on to say quite strongly, and he made certainly the presenters on the show, on the breakfast show, very, very uncomfortable by saying the people who are being penalised are the poor, always the poor. Kick the poor, imprison the poor. They have no voice. The rich and elite get away with it. And that's just disgusting. I do not want to have any part of that system. So strong words. And I think that would probably certainly resonate with me in my experience of certain members of HMRC. There are a number of great guys in HMRC who we get on really well with, and they do a fantastic job. But there is a prevailing attitude amongst some that they do want to kick the small guy because he can't fight back.
Is this also perhaps part of the malaise of the bigger system, because the HMRC are just part of a system? And my sense is that this could take wind under its sails and really start a ball rolling him. It's a completely confused metaphor, but there's something about this that could actually get bigger as people, especially at this time of election time, where bigger, serious questions could be asked of politicians.
Yes, when you see
this is happening on your watch. This is happening on your watch. Are you going to allow this continue? Tell me right now what it is you're going to do about this, Mister.
If of course you can believe them. I mean, I was at this march or a rally a couple of days ago when John McDonnell and a number of other MPs got up and said, well, David Cameron did say no ifs, no buts, no third runway, but you can't believe any politician anymore. And they were saying that of their own party leaders, Labour Party leaders, Conservative Party leaders. So great to try and pin these politicians, put them on the spot. But perhaps, there seems to be an argument that people are now saying, well, I've had enough, I'm going to take direct action. This seems to be a growing trend. I mean, I'm seeing it across the country, actually.
Well, I was thinking, what would happen if not enough people voted? If people actually said, hang on a second, we're really not interested in any of you. We're really, stop the game, stop the music. We're not interested in any of you. Now, what are we going to do now? As opposed to continuing on the same old stories, then either one or the other of the 3 or 4 parties gets in.
Well, I think I'm going to take a slightly political answer to that one and say, well, actually, the way democracy works is it starts with your vote and you have to get involved. So don't not vote.
What happens if
go and stand as an independent?
Stand as an independent?
Absolutely. Why not?
Is that a challenge? Are you challenging me?
Absolutely, Dermot. Yes, I think you've got a lot to add to this town and this country. Absolutely,
you think so?
Yes.
And a very good afternoon. If you've just joined us, this is Dermot Fitzpatrick with you on the Biz Buzz programme. I'm joined this afternoon with my co-presenter Wisdom de Costa and Malcolm Parr, who's joining us in the studio as a guest. We were talking just a few minutes ago about the scandal that is the HSBC tax avoidance banks in Switzerland saga that's going on, and also the actor Greg Wise and his wife Emma Thompson's stand that they are considering not paying any more tax until this gets sorted out. Wisdom, I didn't let you finish actually what you were saying there.
I would love to hear what our listeners think. Is the system broken? Who's to blame? Who's morally bankrupt? Is it? Who do you blame? Do you blame HMRC, or do you blame the managers at HMRC, or the government, or the Treasury ministers? Who actually is responsible for the way HMRC runs?
And if you'd like to join in the conversation this afternoon, you just dial the studio 01628. That's 01628 488 975. That's 01628 488 975. If you want to send us a text, you can send it on 07000 975 975. And if you want to send us an email, you can do that by sending it to studio@marlowfm.co.uk. studio@marlowfm.co.uk. So that's, are we done with that one?
For now, I think, yes.
Have we done enough?
I'm sure that story will run and run and run.
And I noticed that you took us into the political scene there quite swiftly, didn't you?
Absolutely.
You did, didn't you? You're naughty boy.
Perhaps, but this is a chance for, when you talk about the conjunction of politics and business and tax, which is what seems to be happening, here's a time for people to say what they really think.
Because I think it's a great topic, because most people pay some form of tax or their money is being used in some way.
Yep.
And that for whatever reason, and here's a lot of money that's been tied up somewhere that could quite. We're not even talking about those multinationals who are actually making millions of pounds of profit and not paying any tax, but here's some other people. And I think this is an issue.
And actually, when you look at the tax take, we're talking about only about £260 million comes from a small proportion comes from corporation tax. So there is a thought that when you look at the amount of tax that the wealthy are not paying is actually a lot much bigger than the corporation tax take. So we have a bigger effect on our budgets.
So are you saying that the amount of tax that could be paid from those wealthy people is greater than the corporation tax?
It would make sense when you look at the proportion of tax take. The most of the tax that the government earns and takes that we use then to spend on public services is from you and I as individuals, from income tax and national insurance. It's not from the super rich or the wealthy. So what Greg seems to be saying is that there could be billions stashed away somewhere, and that could generate hundreds of millions of pounds worth of tax, which is significantly greater than the corporation tax.
I think this is a great lid. This is a lid to be lifted here.
Absolutely.
And really let's take the lid and run away with it so they can't put it back on it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Greg Wise, come on this programme.
Turn the heat up so it boils over. We can see what's in this pot.
Absolutely.
So I've spoken there as a true accountant. And so then the second part of our conversation this afternoon was, really, can accountants save the world? Let me rephrase it. Can accountants save the world? I wanted to put a bit more credibility into that question.
Okay. Wasn't sure that was tongue-in-cheek there, Dermot, or not.
Me? Quite.
Right.
Never.
Well, that's it's a good question. I think what people are recognising over the last sort of 10 years, and actually the Prince of Wales has had a great significant influence in this question, where he and his team looking at sustainability projects have recognised that there are other forms of capital. It's not just about money. So he and his team have developed these 6 forms of capital which have to be accounted for and reported, or should be looked at by every corporate, because it forms part of their whole value proposition. So what are the 6 areas? So financial capital, manufactured capital, intellectual capital, human capital, the people involved in your business, especially with someone like Facebook. That's not about the money. It really is about what the concepts they've created and how they actually execute that and express that into the world. Social capital, relationships. We talk about networks and how important is someone's networks, which is why obviously public schools actually work very well if you go to them, because the network of people you have, the relationships you develop, have value. And it's the same with a company and a corporate. And of course there's the natural capital, so perhaps to do with the environment and to do with the resources they actually marshal. So, too loud? Okay. Right, so these 6 forms of capital also need to be reported on.
Great. No, I was enjoying your conversation, Dad, so...
I'm talking in capital letters, I can tell.
No, it's okay. I wanted to really get that in my head, because there's a lot. There's a lot of things involved in that, isn't there? It's things that we don't actually normally think about in our normal day-to-day lives.
Absolutely.
And yet they impact on us daily.
Yeah, absolutely right. In fact, a Harvard professor have talked about the new revolutionaries, and he said actually the new revolutionaries are now the accountants. They're the ones who are putting numbers and values to these really items which perhaps weren't recognised before, and saying, great, deal with this.
Thank you.
Right.
I shall reflect on that as we're listening to Keane with Somewhere Only We Know. And this was requested by Malcolm. And so you were also in business, and you've started up a couple of businesses yourself, have you?
Yes, basically I work for corporates quite a lot. I was trying to promote the licence fee for the BBC and other impossible jobs like that.
That's a kind of hot topic at the moment, isn't it?
Yes, I wasn't going to talk about that.
Speaking as someone who doesn't pay a licence, because I don't have a TV and I don't have a licence.
Wow.
I don't watch TV.
Well, you can watch TV catch-up and not pay a licence.
Yes, I could.
At the moment. And my brother launched that service, and he's an entrepreneur, and the entrepreneurs who may be hit in the next election, something I'd like to ask Wisdom in a moment. But basically what I did notice about Marlow, I could only find one business centre. A business centre in American terms is a place where if you have one person or 10 people, you can go in and do instant business, instant flexible business. So I left corporates and I got a little office in a business centre in Harrow, And things took off fairly well. And then I thought it would be nice to have a couple of business centres and improve them a bit. So I did, and looked at the way Americans did it. Then I thought, these people need help because they don't have the skills like accountancy, bookkeeping practices on their doorstep. Training, marketing, employing people, how to grow, all these sort of things. So I joined an enterprise agency and I ran one for a few years in London. And what I did is got those enterprise agencies to come into the business centres and give those skill sets and develop those people. And by doing so, these enterprise agencies, no credit to me, actually doubled the success rate of startup businesses, which at the moment, 53% of startup businesses fell within 5 years. It actually meant that 80% plus actually survived.
Okay. And are you saying that there is a gap in the market for a business centre in Marlow, or has that been filled already now?
Well, my shortcut by turning left at the fire station took me past quite a nice-looking one, but not particularly large, maybe, and I couldn't find any others. I opened up a couple in High Wycombe, and to my knowledge, their occupancy level has been about 90 to 100%. Quite successful, without me, of course, because I'd moved on.
Hotels and business centres.
Hotels, no. I've not tried that, but they're very similar.
But I think we might need a few more hotel rooms.
Oh, absolutely.
In Marlow. There seems to be, or perhaps bed and breakfast or something, because we've got quite a few good bed and breakfasts and a small number of good hotels. Maybe
there are one or two very good hotels near here. They're excellent, and I've stayed at them and really enjoyed them. But I'm looking forward to the time I can just take my boat across the water and have afternoon tea at the Complete Angler. I'll invite you along. Thank
you very much. You see, and that's what we like around, isn't it? He's welcome. He can come back again. So I think let's play. This is another one of your requests was Take That with Patience, which is, I guess, what you need to be running a business these days.
I think you need patience, and it reminds me of someone who overcame all sorts of hardships to succeed.
Thank you. You're listening to Biz Buzz on 97.5, Marlow FM 97.5 with me, Dermot Fitzpatrick, my co-host Wisdom de Costa, and my guest Malcolm Parr. And Malcolm was talking to us about running the business centres that he'd created in High Wycombe and the support that he got from the enterprise agencies. And during the interval there, when we were listening to the music, Wisdom was talking about how companies can value, how we can value companies. Wisdom, do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, we were talking about one of the things at the Prince of Wales. I mean, actually, I find this programme great, fantastic, Dermot. I mean, you've just doing the programme with you, I've challenged so many of my own ideas in terms of the Green Party's thoughts on various tax issues, and now the Prince of Wales is coming out as a real star, an unseen star in terms of helping to introduce this concept of 6 different forms of capital. How do you value business? Is it just about the bottom line, or do you have to look at other things like the environment? Do you have to look at the technical, the social, the relational, all that sort of intellectual property, a whole bunch of other things which need to be accounted for in the value of a business to it, not just its shareholders, but to the community. And so I suppose this is where we sort of come in with this idea at in Marlow, in Windsor, in many other towns, smaller businesses who actually add a great deal more value to the local environment are shutting down because they are being driven out by higher business rates, by landlords who are often pension fund companies who you can't even trace, driving the rents up.
And of course, the money is going to out of the community, isn't it? If there's a local business, then it's hiring locally, and it's the people are probably living in the area and using other facilities. Whereas you've got a big multinational, the profit is actually going elsewhere. It's going outside of the community altogether.
I think there are two issues there. One is that any employer who comes in, any business will employ people, and that's fantastic. Always welcome that in a local community. But you're right, where the increased rent happens, or the increased rates, or the lack of incentives for smaller businesses, that money does come out and leave the community and go to the shareholder or the investor.
There was an article I was reading in the papers yesterday about a company, a law firm in London called Bates, Wells and Braithwaite, and they're really they've got a real social corporate responsibility. They're really working as with entrepreneurs and helping people in the community and building the community. And one of the directors was saying, we live in a society which has always been hugely generous and highly entrepreneurial. The basic principles of business, charities and social organisations working together to try to overcome social problems in a very sound way, said Philip Kirkpatrick, who is Deputy Managing Partner. And I contrast that with this story we were talking about earlier about supermarkets squeezing suppliers, and so that whole, it's almost like the exact opposite of that of you know, you would think, wouldn't you, that if you're an end user like a supermarket, that you would take care of the people down the line so that everybody in the kingdom can prosper, that everybody can benefit from it. But that doesn't seem to be the case. Squeezing suppliers. Who wants to take that one up?
Yeah, you're right. There is an increasing culture now where we see people coming back, companies, and actually looking at the social aspect of their business. So Maserati, for example, they've teamed up with the Centre for Entrepreneurs to introduce the top 100 entrepreneurs to what they're doing and helping to support startups. So you are seeing more and more people start to say, it's not about what's in it for me, but what can I do for you, and seeing that sort of community aspect. Sadly, not so with the many of the large supermarkets or chains. So we've had we all know about the sharp practices of Tesco's, not only well, I could be wrong here, but certain supermarkets, I should say.
Yeah, let's get it right before we mention it. So let's pull that one back into the bag.
All right, well, we'll take the word Tesco's out of
sharp
it.
practice.
Yeah. We'll use the expression that we know that a number of different supermarkets, not only do they squeeze their supply chain, driving prices down, and also extending the payment periods, but also they ask you for an upfront contribution to be even listed in their books. So that has been happening, and we've got Lidl now, who have also been recently criticised for extending their payment terms to 4 months for UK customers, for UK clients.
So they don't pay their suppliers for 4 months. So you've got to finance 4 months of business.
It's more than 4 months, because if you think about the actual time to actually produce the goods and the working capital involved there,
how does that
we're
work?
actually talking about up to 6 months in real terms for our SMEs, for our entrepreneurs to actually fund that product.
Is that a golden goose I hear being slaughtered? What's happening out there, folks?
Right.
How can that work? Malcolm, you wanted to come in on that.
Yes. Several things come up there, actually, which I totally agree, but it's sort of got my mind working too. I know in BT, by the way, that we were not allowed to pay our suppliers for at least 4 months. I was in the promotional side of BT and the marketing side, and the relationship that we had, the relationship problems we had.
As a small supplier, how can you possibly survive? How can you finance? It's almost like a supplier financing BT.
Well, this is the way that certain big companies, big supermarkets have made their money, really.
Company, yes.
Yep. And you've got B&Q as well, so who are also now being criticised for asking for upfront payments from their clients.
Is that reported?
Yeah, absolutely. It is reported. Yes, it's in the Times. I'm safe on that one.
Yes.
If I could just take that point on at entrepreneurs. Because there are 9,000 companies in the UK who actually get entrepreneurs relief, which is a substantial tax cut. And these entrepreneurs are usually the fast-growing companies. They've got some concept, some service, some product, which they feel is innovative, if that's the right word, and challenging, and therefore they're getting enterprise agency status. Their problem is dealing with larger suppliers, and going back to what you said earlier, Wisdom, which is about, it's not just money, it's about building relationships and so on. I think there's 4 elements of trust needed to persuade large firms to trust you, the middle company, if you like. First of all, you've got to make some kind of personal connection. You've got to be on first-name terms. You've got to understand both each other, trust each other. I mean, that's obvious, but seldom done. You've got to ensure your motivation behind the business is generally convincing. They've got to believe you. You've got to prove that you have the ability to deliver consistently, and you have to make sure your way of doing business is actually compatible. Now, we mentioned a supermarket earlier. That is probably the case of most of the larger companies to their suppliers, and until some guidelines are actually followed in this way, there's not going to be much change in the future, I think.
But it's interesting that one of the business ministers is looking to actually take that a bit further. There's obviously this code of conduct where they're looking, if you want to be signed up to the government's actual scheme, then let me check. I'll check with you, tell you what it's called in just a moment. So if you want to come up to be signed up to their prompt payment code, then you have to make sure that you pay people within 60 days, but he's looking to cut that back to 30 days, or being struck off the prompt payment register. Well, why don't they be a bit more, if you like, radical, and think about striking people off if they haven't paid full stop, or striking them off full stop?
Yeah. I mean, it's sometimes you wonder about these, the slap across the wrist, back in the game after, sit on the naughty step for a while and then come back in the game again. This is fascinating. Let's. I think one more thing we just need Bob Marley singing One Love. And we had a message come in, an email came in answer to our question, what would happen if nobody voted? And this is from Anthony. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you for your email. Anthony says, it seems likely that whichever government, even a coalition, is elected this year, will have only a minority of votes. This has been a problem in the UK for decades, but it would seem very probable that the election in 2015 will produce a government which has only been actively voted by about 20% of the population, only about 20% of the population.
It's a frightening thought.
Isn't it just? As such, they will have no mandate at all to rule and no moral right to enforce their point of view. We are moving, says Anthony, into very dangerous times, in his judgment. Comments on that, gentlemen?
Yeah, I think he's right. I'm a great believer that actually democracy starts with your vote, and you have to get involved. So whether that's joining a political party, standing up and telling them what you think, or going and joining your local residents association, or helping people locally, you've got to get involved. If you don't, these guys who maybe 20% will vote for them, they'll have no mandate, but they'll still be in charge. So you have to go and change things.
Malcolm?
I agree entirely. You've got to take a proper interest in your community. You've got to make sure that your representative is well briefed, and you've got to make sure he keeps to his pledges. What happens between him and the rest of his party is another issue. But, I mean, look at how many pledges were broken in my mind at the last election. Am I allowed to say that?
Mindfully, yes. Mindfully.
Okay,
because
it's mindfully.
We are in times of election at the moment, so we need to be very balanced in our view.
I understand that. So, yes, I agree.
I was going to just, if only 20% of the people of the population vote, what is that not telling us something?
It's telling us something quite dramatic.
That
there's
80%
no confidence in our system.
So 80% of the people are refraining from voting
in our politicians
because there's something not quite working. How low does it need to go before, as the song goes, before it actually, it starts to actually become apparent?
Well, if people don't rattle the cage, then nothing will happen.
So rattle cages.
Absolutely.
Okay. So what was the next point on our agenda?
Well, I would love to hear from our listeners. If there are any SMEs out there, entrepreneurs, are you being squeezed by your clients? Are they causing you to take greater and greater risks? Are they causing you cash flow problems? We all know that cash is king, and actually facing those sorts of squeezes from people you sell to, whether it be a supermarket chain or a big hardware store, they can cause bankruptcy. So we'd love to hear from you. What are you experiencing? And
if you happen to be a shop owner in the high street and the rent that you're paying is squeezing you out for the multinationals, give us a call on 01628 488 975. That's 01628 488 975. If you want to text us, you can do that on 07900 975 975. That's 07900 975 975. And like Anthony, and thank you, Anthony, for your email. If you want to email us, you can do so at studio@marlowfm.co.uk. What's next?
We're going to look at some top employers, won't we?
Yeah, top employers. What does it take to become a top employer?
That's a great question. What do you think, Malcolm?
You've just passed the ball. That's unfair. You passed the ball to a guest. That's a yellow card.
All right, I'll take that one, and then you can come back to me.
You're on the yellow mic.
All right,
so
here we go.
That.
All right, primary benefits. Okay, so here's this survey. Here are some of the things that the Guardian has reported on. So some of the conditions they've looked at with different employers to say, are you a good employer or not? Well, looking at primary benefits, what is the direct pay, the pension, the shares, or the monetary benefits that they provide? Some secondary benefits, well, what do we do in terms of non-monetary benefits? How much leave do you get? How much maternity pay is obviously a statutory thing now. And what do you have flexible working? You're allowed to work from home? Do you have all sorts of other benefits like health and recreational advice? What about training and development? Is the individual developed? Are there initiatives and programs that help the individual, the employee, to develop themselves, not just in their job role, but also outside of their job role? And then culture management isn't something else that many of these top companies look at. So how well do you facilitate social interaction, employee input, diversity initiatives, social responsibility schemes that help create a positive environment? So those are a few, I suppose, a starter for 10, if you like, a few things that are used to evaluate top companies.
And is there somebody who's monitoring that? I mean, who awards the top employers? Is there a process?
Oh, great question. I mean, I'm certainly, I think it was Grant Thornton validates the research.
So they would send
another firm of accountants.
And the accountants rule the world.
Absolutely. Saving the world.
Saving the world. So they probably send out some surveys or something like that and ask people?
I'm sure they do surveys. They look at the corporate reports and look at the graduate fairs, because I think many of these are focused on graduate fairs, and that's where most people will be out there selling themselves.
There always have been employers who are exemplary, even in way back in Cadbury's time and Rowntree and those guys up there with the mills and that. There were some of them who were actually really, what's the word I'm looking for? Philanthropic. They would build the houses, they would put schools, they would hospitals, and the people actually worked hard, and they really took care of the people. And others just allowed people to work under adverse conditions. Malcolm?
Just thinking of a small example to that, really. Rather a personal one. I worked for British Airways for 12 years, and I gave a lot to that. And in fact, I'm writing a book about it at the moment, which I'll probably get sued for. So I've enjoyed free travel
plug there.
Oh dear. I've enjoyed free travel for a long time, and it seemed to have come to an end. I wrote to British Airways and said, look, hey, I used to work for you. I've been travelling around a bit. Here's some correspondence. Am I allowed to continue flying with you, or what is the future? It took me 4 weeks later. I got a brown envelope, got my name on it, Parr, not Malcolm Parr or Mr. Parr or anything you like. And inside was a duplicated piece of paper from British Airways saying, we don't answer correspondence anymore, you must email in. And to me, that's a sign of the way customer service has changed dramatically over the last 10 or 12 years. And I feel really saddened at some of the aspects of company behaviour to their employees at the moment.
It surprised me because I remember some time ago when I was in the hotel business, and the British Airways had that putting people first. They had an exemplary customer care, staff care programme from top to bottom. So that's obviously something has changed.
It was the best airline in the world, in my mind.
Pardon?
It was the best airline in the world. Yeah. It's still very good.
And I noticed they're not on the top 100 list.
They're not on the top 100 list, yeah. And
right.
I see Ryanair, just to bring Ryanair, they're now starting... Michael O'Leary said if I'd known that good customer service was going to be so popular and good for the bottom line, I would have done it years ago. There's a quote I read from him.
Wonderful.
Yesterday. I mean, what I love about it, he's like it's Farage. He can say almost what he wants. You know, he comes out with these things. And he was saying he said it's not a question. It's a question of profitability. You know, he's doing it because it improves the bottom line. I can remember a story about an American airline, and it was the lowest. It was the lowest cost airline in America,
That's
or something
right.
like that. And one of the employees came in and said that they wanted to introduce something on the menu. And he said, hey, explain to me how putting this salad on the menu is going to relate to us being the low-cost airline in the world. And she couldn't, and he said, well, it's not going on the menu then. So it's very clear of knowing what you want.
I think we need to send Mr. O'Leary a copy of the Six Capitals book and introduce him perhaps to the Prince of Wales.
Okay, I'll leave that one for you to do in your spare time. What I was thinking about as well is that these the low cost airlines and the supermarkets with 2 for 1 and are we doing a deal? They wouldn't exist if we didn't shop there. If we didn't buy their doing a deals, if we didn't use their airlines, they wouldn't. So obviously we're part of the system. We're part of the.
That's a very good point.
We're part of the problem, and the same with the banks. You know, we're doing something. We're all doing something. We're all part of the system. There is no them and us. because at some point down the line, we're all in some way connected.
It's a very sobering thought,
We're buying
Dermot.
the petrol, we're banking, we're buying in the shops, we're spending our money in some ways. And it always surprised me that companies who are perceived not to be paying tax in terms of maybe some supplying coffee or drinks, etc., people still go and buy their coffee there. If we felt that strongly about them, we wouldn't be doing that. So it's time, I think, for us to go to the news.
97.5 FM and online. This is Marlow FM 97.5. Biz Buzz on Mallow FM 97.5.
So what's happening with this debate? So 1 minute they want a debate and they want this and that, this political debate with Mr. Cameron and Miliband and so on. Any comments on that?
It's certainly perplexing, isn't it? Is he running scared? I'm not sure.
What's happening?
Is he afraid of making more promises?
I mean, we'd imagine with confidence you'd want to take it on and say, yeah, I know exactly who I am. I know exactly what I want to do. I want another 5 years. I want to get in government. I wanted whatever it is that the people want. You imagine
it couldn't be worse than PMQs, surely.
No.
Prime Minister's question time.
Well, maybe that's all it'll set up. Maybe this questions are it's a little bit set up. Could be. Could be. Malcolm, any thoughts on the?
By this stage of the election planning, a lot of words are normally said. It's a very different pattern from previous years, and I do wonder why the policy is. I wonder why the policy is of just keeping quiet at this stage. It's a lot to gain. They're all good speakers in my mind. It'll be very interesting debates, and it's what politics are about.
Yeah, and it's something to do with whether they have declared the manifesto, if they're doing it before the manifesto is declared or not. And of course, that would become more challenging if you declare what it is you're actually going to do.
Exactly.
Then it gives the opposition more questions to ask you about it.
Exactly.
And yet we the listeners would like to know what the manifesto is, so it makes the debate that bit more. Again, it's almost like it's not for us. They're arranging this game as if they're trying to make sure that the field is this level or how many players they've got, but they're not interested in the spectators, the value to the spectators.
You could almost leave the country until the clocks go forward because you won't miss anything.
You heard it here.
It's a damning comment.
Sorry.
With the last one, what was it that used to have with the last one leaving the country put us, please switch off the lights.
Switch off the lights, yes.
Wisdom, you've been out there. I think you've been consulting with the Oracle. I have a feeling that you've got some hot top tips for us. Wisdom's top tax tips.
Oh, right. Okay, I've got you. I thought you were talking about the telephone call. We had another marketing call. Gosh.
Was it?
It was, yes.
Oh, I wish I'd taken that.
Absolutely. How do you deal with these marketing calls from strange countries?
From strange countries? I just send them the money. I send them the money.
You do?
I just whatever it is. I mean, it's worth a punt.
Okay,
somebody whose father was a king, he's got 50 million in a bank. They're looking for $500,000. Why wouldn't you do it?
Can I give your email address out on air?
You'd have to give it a punt, wouldn't you, Wisdom?
Okay. Right.
And what I tend to do is I say, look, I'm busy at the moment. Could you give me your home number so I can call you this evening?
Okay. And I'll send you all my bank details.
And I'll send you all my bank details.
Fantastic. Great. I've got 3 tax tips, just 3 this week for you. Okay, the first one is for landlords. So if you're a buy-to-let landlord, you better be quick because your £1,500 tax relief in terms of your Green Deal for improving your properties is about to end. So you have to claim before the 6th of April, and you can claim also income tax relief using the London Landlord's Energy Saving Allowance and a further £5,600 of the Green Deal cashback. But you have to act soon. So the way to do that is by going online to the directgov.org and type in Green Deal. So
just give me, what's the headline? Who would I need to be in order to benefit from that?
Great. If you're a landlord, so many of my clients have, in addition to their day jobs, they also have properties.
Okay.
So if you're a buy-to-let landlord and you've got a property and you're letting it out. You're letting it out and you're going to put in some new equipment, some energy-saving equipment in relation to what the government allows you to put in, then you've got just a few more weeks left to claim your up to £6,000, £7,000 of allowances.
Hey, good. That's a good tip.
Hopefully.
Ka-ching. Number 2.
Another one. Okay, here is another one. From today, if you're on a relatively low level of income and you're married, you can transfer part of your tax allowance to your spouse. So you can transfer up to £1,060 of your personal allowance or your personal tax-free allowance to your partner. But if either you or your partner are earning more than £42,000, it's not going to benefit you. So how do you claim? Again, go back to the type in married allowance or marriage allowance onto the DirectGov website, and it will come up with an application form. You fill that application form in, and someone from HMRC will contact you.
That's
positively.
No, that's good.
Right.
That's good. We were a bit disparaging about HMRC earlier.
Some people at HMRC. There are some wonderful people at HMRC.
Yes.
I deal with many wonderful tax
recording.
inspectors, absolutely, and VAT inspectors, I have to say.
And
I'm widening the scale. Absolutely.
You're starting to widen the field. Here.
Absolutely, hedging all my bets.
Let's have the third Wisdom's Tax Top Tips.
You try saying that again after after a couple of drinks. All right, the third one. It's just for people, and this is happening quite a lot, where many people will have not just one job, but probably 2 or 3 smaller jobs. So the key thing here is to check your tax code, because for some of you may have the wrong tax code, and so you may be paying too much tax. So there's 2-3 things to look at. What normally happens is that your main employer will have your normal tax code, which is going to be 100L now, and your next employer will have a basic rate tax code. So I think I can sense that this is so complicated that I think we ought to write an article perhaps and post it on the Marlow FM website.
That would be useful.
I'll do that. I'll get you something onto the Marlow FM website for next week.
So listener, if you're looking for information on this, so give me the headline again.
This will be check your tax code.
Check your tax code, especially if you've got 1 or 2 jobs.
If you've got 2 or more
because you may
jobs.
be paying more tax.
You may be paying more tax,
Yes.
and also there are allowances which we will tell you about, which you can claim.
Wisdom, thank you very much for 3 of your Wisdom's top 10 tax tips for this show.
Fantastic.
Right. Is the recession over? Are we out of the muddy waters?
I think we're seeing lots of mixed signals, aren't we? I think what people are experiencing may not be quite the same as what the government is reporting at a macroeconomic level.
I mean, I was reading an article yesterday about boom in construction jobs, lots of jobs in construction, and that possibly recession was over.
There are lots of indicators which seem to show that people are getting it good, or some organisations are. You're right, the service sector, their recession index, which is the market SIPS index, is above 50 again. The Eurozone seems to be again flourishing and taking on many more people in many of the companies. Employment is set to increase, not unemployment, but employment is set to increase by 1.2% over the next few years. These are all the latest government stats by them and from another accountancy firm, Ernst & Young.
However,
we're saying that the wages are increasing. Real wages apparently are increasing, and we're saying that unemployment is now dropping to 1.86 million. But that's
I was waiting for the but. I was going to say, do I feel a but coming on?
Absolutely. Yeah, a worrying situation is what one of my friends calls underemployment. Not unemployment, but underemployment. We're seeing more and more people, especially the younger end of the age spectrum, on 0-hour contracts and minimum wage. And that is a big problem, because not only can you not afford to live, you have to live at home, and you can barely afford to pay the rent at home.
Well, that's very true. I have a daughter living with me at home who would like to go out into the world. She works for retail and realises that as much as she loves her job and the design elements of her job, she doesn't really have enough to live on at the moment by herself.
So because it's sometimes it can be the smoke and mirrors. It appears as if we're bigging it up or something like that. But then when you actually hear stories about what's actually happening
there's an interesting book called The Zero Cost Based Economy, or Zero Marginal Costing. I'll bring it on next week or next time we're on the show. But it talks about how more companies will be using techniques to reduce their cost base, and who are the people who are going to be paying? Well, it's going to be our kids and people at the bottom end of the wage scale. So the incremental cost of doing things is going to be driven down to almost zero. And the combination effect of that is that people at the lower end of the wage scale will earn less, work longer hours, but the shareholders will become increasingly wealthy, leveraging millions and millions of people and markets of millions and billions to increase their profitability. That's a lovely thought to end.
Well, we're not going to end with that one. But I asked the question. Look, I just asked the question: was the recession over?
Yeah, I think it's an experiential one, isn't it? Our listeners have to say, for you, is it over?
Does it feel like it's over?
Yep. Or does it continue on unabated?
Because sometimes when I go into London and the restaurants are full, the bars are full. Let's talk about what's a 50 million. The West End is getting applauded for because it's attracting so much business and tourism and theatres and restaurants and bars and property development. Maybe that's just the West End.
I think London's dropped to about number 11 or 12 of the most expensive cities to live in, which is surprising because we were quite high up. I need to be checked on that, but I know that Singapore is at the top. And Singapore, if you walked around Singapore 10, 20 years ago, you'd enjoy Boogie Street. You'd be able to sort of relax in there. You'd have a real Beefeater gin have a real Plymouth gin in Raffles.
It's at least 2 more plugs there. You're doing so well.
This is a man who's been around the world, yes. Okay.
I haven't signed the contract yet.
We've gone international.
I was thinking about the gin companies, actually.
And there are lots more gins out there than those 2 previously
Many
mentioned.
very good gins. And I'm not mentioning anything about blue bottles or green bottles or anything else.
Let's not go there. Yeah, so I mean, I think we just need to watch what's happening, keep our finger on the pulse, because I think there's changing times are coming. There's things happening. There's things happening. Peggy Sue by Buddy Holly, and the reason we played that unusual piece of music was because as we came into the studio, Wisdom was telling us that he has a new addition to his family. Do you want to tell us that little story?
We actually have another new addition because obviously we talked about Rogan a couple of weeks ago.
We did.
But this one is a little cavalier called. We've named her Peggy, and the reason she's come into the family was that my wife, as a community midwife, was driving around and not driving deliberately around, but obviously off to see a patient. And she had to stop her car because the cars in front of her were going rather slow. And as she opened the door to say something, this little dog jumped into the car. The dog, it seems, I'll cut a long story short, was very distressed. And it would appear from having spoken to the dog wardens and the vets that a number of people had bred her for 6 or 7 years until the number of puppies she actually delivers drops, and then just dumped her on the streets.
Oh, yes.
But she's got a happy home now, and you're probably wondering why she's called Peggy.
We were
absolutely
on the edge of our seats.
Well, my wife decided to call her Peggy because she has a lot to say for herself. She's a real chatty dog, and she just reminds her of Peggy Mitchell from EastEnders. So she just can see her saying, "Get out my pub," in a very terrible Cockney accent.
And just what's it like having a dog in the family?
A third dog in the family.
Yes, sorry, I keep forgetting that you've got Rowan.
We've got a menagerie at home.
Menagerie, yes.
That's right. Yeah, she's lovely. She's a beautiful dog. Lovely little cavalier, very social. But the fact that she's been mistreated, and we've got 2 other rescue dogs, she's recovering incredibly well and very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a beautiful little girl.
Thank you for that. Well, that's a lovely human interest story to end the programme with. We've had quite a spectrum of conversation this afternoon from the misdoings at the HSBC Bank and Swiss banks and the actor Greg Wise and Emma Thompson with their campaign. We've had things about the government, whether they want to debate or not, and how they want to debate things. The accountants saving the world. And what would happen if nobody voted? Anthony sent in a lovely email describing what he thinks will happen. Any final comments, gentlemen, before we play our last piece of music? It's been great having you on the programme, Brady. It's been real fun.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it. I've learned a lot today. They say on Sunday newspaper, there's enough words in a Sunday newspaper to fill 2 novels. And I think there's enough stories this afternoon to actually run this programme for a week, non-stop.
Any one of them, yeah, we could have headlined it.
Yeah. I have to make a slight correction. I said that the tax take from corporation tax was 260 million. I actually meant 40 billion. Bit of a difference there. But still, as a proportion of the overall tax take, corporation tax is pretty small. I have a question for you listeners. We're talking about tax and how, I won't explain why until next time, the tax take seems to be increasing in this last year. So what should we do with that tax money? What would you spend it on?
So if they were the government, if the listener was a government?
Or no, as you are, what would you spend that money on? What would your vote be for spending it on? Would it be on the NHS, on education? And if it's on education, do you want more schools, better equipped schools? Do you want more types of operations? What would you spend the money on?
Excellent question. So this is, we will be back with you in 2 weeks' time, on Thursday in 2 weeks' time, for the Biz Buzz programme at 2 o'clock until 3:30. And this is me, Dermot Fitzpatrick, signing out and saying thank you for listening. And I'd like to also thank my co-presenter Wisdom for joining me this afternoon again, and also to Malcolm. Malcolm, I hope that we can see you again here in the studio on a regular slot within Marlow FM. You're very welcome.
I'd love to, and I will take the canoe across next time.
I'd love to see you coming across. We could actually talk. We could somehow get you a roving mic, and we could do an outside.
You mean a rowing mic?
Rowing mic. We could get an outside broadcast going. He's coming. Oops, he's coming across the road. Oh, he's gone in. Oh right.
By the pub.
By the pub. He's gone by the pub. He's gone to the Complete Angler for afternoon tea. We'll leave you with TV dinners with ZZ Top. Have a good week.